Right. And we're live.
In.
Glenn, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invite as always, Lewis.
Pleasure. Right, while people are joining us, let's get our logo going on there.
Yeah, get all the deets up there.
Let's get everything up there. If you want to ask a question, please stick it below. Thanks everyone for joining. This year obviously has been relentless and crazy, and for me it's been a year of the live show for me. For April time. Actually, I think you invited me in January for your show, which was my first one.
Yeah.
Which was great. And since then it feels like it's just everyone's embracing it now. So
100%. And more the better, right? The more I think, the kind of talent acquisition and kind of recruitment community are kind of showing exactly what they can deliver in terms of value.
Yes.
All good.
100%.
All good.
100%. So to start with, we've got, for context, I've had loads of questions in. We're going to address them specifically. We've also gone through some of the content and the posts over this last year, and I've picked out a few that have been particularly topical and popular. We'll cover those as well. But to start with, interested to hear your perspective on the most interesting trends you found this year.
Ooh, most interesting trends. So I was kind of thinking about this prior to coming on the show, and I was like, okay, do we think about, am I thinking about predictive analytics? Am I thinking about kind of NLP for screening and kind of, screening candidates, or, the overarching kind of piece around AI as an umbrella term? There's obviously a number of kind of vertical pieces underneath it. But I think that the piece I was most interested in and probably the most excited by was culture first hiring. Right. So that almost,
which is what?
Well, instead of your standard kind of competency-based Q&A through an interview-based process, right? And obviously leveraging heavily on skills, experience, knowledge, you're actually looking at perhaps more of a values-based alignment, soft skills, and actually incorporate, so not 100%, kind of culture first hiring, but incorporating that as part of a standard recruitment process. So, if you were looking at soft skills, you were looking at kind of communication, how people articulate, how they align, what values do they have already? How do those values perhaps align to your business? Because obviously, as we appreciate values, I think it should be the foundation of a culture. Now, how you interpret those values is entirely down to you as an individual. But if you align to those values, that creates a foundation within a particular business and a company. And then ultimately you build on that. Because I think, let's be fair, there's been a lot of talk, certainly over the last 12 months, about culture and what company culture is. My genuine belief is that the culture of any business is owned by the people in it. So therefore it's an organic thing.
True.
And if you can start to incorporate that kind of culture first hiring element into the overarching, kind of recruitment process, I think I believe it's going to deliver benefits.
Yeah. My caution on it, if I could take the slightly other bit, is, and I did an article on this years ago, but do corporate values limit diversity in the hiring process? Was the question that I was asked. And so I think, and ultimately I think it can. So if people are just focused on finding people like themselves, because you have like this feedback is always they're not quite the right fit, or they don't quite match the values. So I think if it's used, you're right, if it's used well, amazing, right? Like let's hire a bunch of kind people, let's hire people that share our view on corporate social responsibility or the environment, stuff like that. But I think there's a line where hopefully you've got to be careful not to cross. That's my thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I agree. I think the two go hand in hand. Ultimately, you need to have a really, strong sense of, or certainly diversity in any business is really important. So it almost goes hand in hand. If you are promoting a very diverse and inclusive workforce, then culture-based and culture-first hiring is well aligned.
Yeah.
If you're using culture first hiring in isolation, and you're not thinking about cultural diversity or any kind of diversity within your business, then yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just going to be another mode of hiring people that look like me. So yeah, I agree. I think it's a really interesting one, and it just opens up the scope of what HR, TA, recruitment teams need to really think about now. And it's not, kind of recruitment in isolation. It doesn't really have an impact in the business until that person arrives. It's so interlinked that I think that longer term kind of journey really needs to be looked at by people in our community. It's a big responsibility, man. Seriously.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's also making sure that your employer branding, so the way you get across what your culture is and your values, actually is true, right? Like once they start, this is what I was told. The other big thing, which maybe we can discuss a bit later in the show, is how do you get your culture across virtually? So many people, they're doing a Zoom, they spoke to someone, the internet connection was a bit dodgy, they spoke to someone else, they've not gone in, they've not been made a coffee, someone hasn't taken their coat, just those little things that you start to feel that this could be home for you. And a lot of people are thinking through like how that works, which I think
there is a stat from a Deloitte report that says 90% of candidates or individuals that are going through an interview process, if they have a positive experience during the interview, that has the power to shift their thinking around the company itself. Because let's be fair, when you go into an interview process, you have a perception of a business, based on their kind of website, like you say, their kind of brand proposition. But you're also looking to discover exactly what that business is really like through the people that you're going to be interviewing with. Yeah. So if you have a really positive experience, I think that resonates in terms of your attractiveness towards that particular business and brand. Now, that then comes with the responsibility of the business to interview in a way that's not just like transactional, like I have a question, you answer a question. It's about how they advocate for the business within the interview, how they make that individual feel in an interview, and that's super important. And that translates to in-person or over video. I think with video, you have to be more mindful, definitely, because there's certain things that you need to kind of project and convey, and how you communicate there are different kind of frames of reference. But I do think that, certainly that first point of interview and interacting with a business, people, certainly the people that are interviewing, so whether you're TA, whether you're recruitment, whether you're hiring manager, you've really got to think about how you want to position your team, the business, the brand, so that there is, again, that kind of responsibility to really be thoughtful and mindful when you're putting together a kind of recruitment process, because it's not a process anymore. It's an experience.
Yeah, 100%. Love that. It's also interesting here, people are commenting a little bit. Oh, they use Teams. Oh, they use Zoom. They use Google Meets.
It's polarizing, isn't it? Immediately like, oh, they're a Zoom shop. I don't really fancy them. I'm more a Teams person. I think it's really about whether it's Teams or it's Zoom, whether it's Slack video, as WhatsApp video message, whatever it is. I think it's about how you're mindful of how you come across in those interactions, in those meetings. That's the piece that's really important. Yes, the tech is, the resilience of it and the reliability. I mean, come on,
That's always. I had a friend of mine was interviewing for a CFO role, and it was 3 people interviewing him over Zoom or Teams. I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah.
And so one of them. So first, it's pretty tough, I think, like 3-on-1, even in person. But on video, it feels a bit tough. And one of them was like this. So like the phone was clearly down there. It was poking up a little bit over, but they were going like that. Almost laughing a little bit. The other one who wasn't asking a question, and this guy was like, really, do you want me here or not? I mean, it's quite it's easy to get distracted, really easy to get distracted on video, because so many things are popping up on the screen. It's like focus on the person in front of you, give them
definitely
that hour or half an hour, whatever you've given them, like be present.
Yeah, I think that's you've nailed it there, Lewis. It's be present in that moment. Give your full attention and concentration to that person who's taken time out of their day to interview with you and kind of discuss their skills, their experience. So again, it's think about going into that particular video interview in terms of the experience you want to create for that person.
Yeah.
I think it's super important. And I think it will become increasingly more important as we go into 2021 with the uncertainty of, do we return to the office? Don't we return to the office? And actually that whole big conversation that every HR team is probably waiting to have, which is, an employee rocking up and going, I don't want to be in the office Monday to Friday anymore. Actually, I want my contract changed to reflect the fact that I'm happy to work 3 days a week at home, 2 days a week in the office. And those kind of conversations are coming. They're probably being had at the moment in isolation. But I do think that I think there's going to be a big boom around that particular topic alone. What are your thoughts?
I think that might be one of our interesting trends of 2021 in this time.
Cool. Let's park it for the moment then.
Not talk about it. Yeah. I think it's a great conversation, and one that, I agree, that's starting. What I found really interesting, the Office of National Statistics, which for those that are not in the UK, is the UK statistics thing. They did a survey, I think it was 20,000 companies, and they asked them, will you be pursuing a work from home policy once the pandemic is over? And surprisingly for me, 68% said no.
That is surprising, actually.
This is cross-sector. And I think also when we speak about work from home, I'm always mindful that an awful lot of people don't have the option, right?
Yes,
NHS workers, firemen, policemen, delivery drivers, who have been holding the country together. So this is office-based workers who have the luxury of having these kinds of conversations. And
Agreed.
Absolutely, I think it's, it's here, it's coming. Yeah. We'll see.
Well, for those 68% of companies, perhaps the conversation is not on the table at the moment. They may not be considering it at the moment, but that's perhaps because the workforce hasn't presented their thoughts around what they would want going forward. Because at the moment, it's still in that kind of grey area of, okay, we have to work from home, depending on obviously your job, of course. So it's not really a subject to discuss. I think as we head into certainly Q1 of 2021, and if all the reports around the vaccine are correct and start to deliver, there will be the conversations around, okay, when is the kind of the workforce returning to the office? And then that's the catalyst for, do I want to return to the office? So I think, do that ONS survey probably in March of next year. It might be a slightly different percentage.
I think it's so interesting. It's so much variation. I spoke to one friend who runs a company who's scrapped their office completely. So that they will appeal to people that don't want an office, and they're happy with that. I speak to an awful lot of people who are desperate to come back to the office, like desperate. A lot of people live on their own. Younger people who are flat sharing, they're working out of their bedroom right now. They want to come in. And it's not just an age thing. There's a lot of senior leaders want to come in. They like, because we like routine, and I understand. I love commuting, or I've been doing a fake commute if I haven't been actually commuting. And so I think we're creatures of habit, and there seems to be so much variation in what people want, and hopefully the thing that comes out of it is choice for people. But then you always have to be mindful that the company might require you to be in for a particular reason. So there needs to be some, I think, flexibility on both sides ultimately for it to work well.
I agree. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how the kind of early part of 2021 plays out, just in terms of that whole kind of organizational model of kind of office, in office, remote. Because I think the general sort of subjective view I have is that people have got used to kind of the routine of working from home now, right? So they're kind of into that pattern. And certainly if you have an hour plus or anything over an hour commute, getting like 2 hours, 3 hours back in your day is pretty appealing, right?
Yeah. Yes. Depending on how you look at it. This is the beauty of this conversation, because you're right. And someone said this to me this morning. And then for me personally, I really value that commuting time, because I find it's just me. I get to think a bit. It's quite, if I'm cycling in or I'm walking or I'm getting the tube or whatever, It's quite a meditative time. I've got my headphones in. I'm listening to your new podcast, never mind the job spec. And, little shout out. But it's just me. And I really value that. And I like to program those kinds of things in. So everyone's different. I mean, it's just, it's a really interesting one. If I may, a few trends that I've noticed this year, from my perspective, being running an agency. I've said so three really. I found time to hire has quickened. I found that, when I do international searches before the pandemic, things took quite a long time, and senior searches do typically take a while. But a lot of the time, it's just organizing diaries, someone to fly from Germany to the UK or America or whatever it might be. Now everything's been virtual. I found that the interview processes have got a little bit shorter time-wise, which for me has been interesting as well, and good experience for the candidates. I've also found, which is really interesting, is that companies have been happy for me to hire and source people wherever. So the role pre-pandemic might have been based in London, and now they're like, "Hey, do you know what? Go find us someone anywhere. We don't mind." Yeah. And so that's great because the talent pools are larger. I've seen more diversity on the long lists because you're sourcing from a much wider geographical scope, and companies get a better choice ultimately. So for me, they've been really interesting this year.
No, it sounds great, and I think if companies can show that flexibility of kind of hiring people based in kind of different locations, irrespective of where the job should be based per se. I think that can only, to your point, it can only open up a really more diverse talent pool for businesses, and they should really embrace that. I think any businesses that are perhaps thinking, let's consider remote working and people in different locations until maybe March or April, and then they've got to come into the office 5 days a week. It's not going to work. You do need to be thinking long term about that. You need to have, I think you do need to have you need a policy around it now. Certainly HR teams need a policy around it now that they can give to kind of recruitment and TA teams and say, you can openly talk about this. This is what we've adopted going forward. We're thinking a lot further forward than quarter to quarter. This is now our policy. We're thinking about, how we can operate. We've learned from the lockdown and all the sort of change in working conditions, change in working environments, and how we've had to adapt. And we're embracing that. We're taking that learning and we're implementing that into our policies going forward. I think those businesses that perhaps really do think about that will win longer term and continue to attract the sort of diverse talent that you're talking about.
100%. It leads us beautifully into another question, which I'm going to put up here. What are people actually looking for from a company today? So, there's a lot of companies that have been hiring throughout the pandemic. There's still a war for talent. People are still hiring. Others haven't been. Everything's been quite variable. But just to the recent stuff we just talked about, what do you think people are actually looking for now?
So individuals looking for a new job at the moment, I think, want transparency about the process. I think they also, and this is the great thing that, certainly shows like this and other shows are informing individuals about the recruitment and talent acquisition world process. So they're more educated around the process they're potentially going into. So they want more transparency. I think they want some assurance that, certainly a business has addressed things like unconscious bias or biases, that they are mindful of, a very diverse and inclusive working environment. So I think that there's a number of kind of broader things they're looking for other than just perhaps an EVP, which I think for me, and I wrote this down just simply because it's something I just keep sort of churning around in my mind, is the EVP, I think. And
for those that don't know, EVP.
Oh yeah, employee value proposition, basically. So, you're kind of, let us put it, it's brand values, mission alignment, and then all the pieces around that, kind of salary, etc., and benefits, everything wrapped in. So I think the EVP was probably the right thing to reference pre-pandemic. I think the thing that companies maybe need to consider now is the employee connection proposition. So the value comes in the connectivity with your people, and that, I think that flows into diversity inclusion. I think that flows into transparency. I think that flows into essentially things like remote working in office. How, and certainly where you've perhaps furloughed some of your staff, how are you going to get them to reconnect with your business? Because to assume that they will come back feeling exactly the same way, I think is perhaps a little naive.
Also, an awful lot of colleagues might have been hired over lockdown, which means you never met half your new group. I spoke to a TA guy last week, and he said most of his company now were hired after April, so we're all virtually. So mashing that up all together is going to be
exactly. So
really interesting.
Your EVP is something that that's the long time reference thing, but it's that employee connection proposition. How are you connecting with your employee now? And I think that's super that I think that TA, rec, and HR teams are going to really need to consider that connection or reconnection. So back to my point, I think individuals looking for jobs now are definitely looking for that transparency. They're looking to want to really understand the process they're going to go through. And then equally as well, they're looking for an experience, not just a straightforward, as we know it, kind of competency-based interview. They want to feel like they're learning and experiencing the company when they go through that process.
Yeah, and for me, it's like I always come back to storytelling. What's for the candidate? What will the next chapter of my career look like if I join this company? Is it going to be cool? Am I going to learn stuff? I see from my side, I see some really interesting things of what people are looking for. I find that the people are really focused on a company with a clear mission. They want to know that the company knows where it's headed. Also, that there's some altruistic thing. It's not just about profit, but they're doing some good in the world, whatever that might look like for that firm.
Definitely.
I'm finding culture, as you mentioned, is really important. Collaborative, innovative. Again, getting that across as a company virtually, I think some people are getting right. It's quite a tough thing to do, I think. I'm also finding, and a lot of managers and leaders behaved really well over the pandemic. Others didn't, and that's being remembered now. Because people want to work for companies that care, that perceive care, but also genuinely do care and have done stuff, and that people have seen. So I think that's really important. And then I think the working arrangements are going to be really important. So whether it's flexible and remote, whether it's I really want somewhere to go to, but this company doesn't have it, so I might go somewhere. So that flexibility in working style is going to be important for people, and that will vary, of course.
I think that question also links into another. So look, I don't want to sort of doom and gloom, but the stat is, and I think from July to September, the unemployment rate now is 4.8% in the UK.
Yeah.
So there's considerably more people looking for work. And I think those individuals, that increased volume of individuals are looking for is acknowledgement. If they're applying for a job, they want to be acknowledged. They want that application to be acknowledged. They don't, to perhaps one of the questions you asked me, which was, they don't want to be just ghosted, or they don't want to be ignored. They want to, even if it's look, hey, Glenn, Lewis, thanks for the application. We've got X amount of volume applications at the moment. This is where we are in the process. This is the kind of long list. This is where you are, and just kind of gives them some context. So rather than just nothing, they're again, it comes back to that point around experience. And I think that links into a couple of things that were big, were certainly going to be predicted to be big trends in 2020, which was like the kind of mobile job searching experience. And equally how, as I said, AI might be utilized to create or automate part of that experience. Perhaps, I don't know fully whether we've seen some real great examples of that. But I do think with that increased number of people looking for job opportunities, we do need to be mindful of, acknowledging them.
Definitely. There was, and we had a question about, so I put it on the screen actually, when should companies provide candidates with feedback? So let's unpack that a little bit. I think just on your AI and automating part of the recruitment hiring process, it's been going on for a while, and for certain jobs, I don't know if Amazon hired 150,000 people this year. A lot of them probably were warehouse workers, drivers, stuff like that, and that can be, an awful lot of that can be automated before they get to a human. But you still need a level of service, even if it's by an AI.
Yeah.
What do you think? So do you, like, if someone applies online, is it okay for them to get an email saying, sorry, you've not been selected? Should they get a phone call? What's the kind of like the standard that?
I'll take your point. I think, where perhaps it's volume recruitment, if they're not successful, I don't know. I mean, you could do better than thanks but no thanks, right? Which is basically, thanks for applying. We've considered your application. You've not been successful. I think, if we're saying we can automate that and we can actually create something a bit more kind of engaging and tangible, then we should be able to do better than that, right? And I think you can mix the channels as well, in so much as if I applied kind of over, I don't know, LinkedIn desktop and stuff like that, I'm providing my personal information as well, right? I might provide my mobile. So I've applied online and then I get a text message saying, hey, Glenn, thanks for the application. It's being reviewed. And that kind of switch of channels can actually create an experience itself, right? And then, maybe in sort of 48 hours, I get another text message saying, we're just coming to the end of the review process, Glenn. Check your inbox during the course of the next 24 hours for an update. And it's guiding people cross channels and creating an experience. Now, ultimately, they may still be unsuccessful, but at least you're giving them transparency in terms of the process and the fact that they're being considered. And actually that perhaps, if it's a successful outcome and you're moving them forward, brilliant. You can continue that kind of mix of channels, right? But if they're unsuccessful, at least kind of provide them with some context and leave the door open for future applications. I mean, one thing I always say to people is, it may be no progression at this moment in time, but it doesn't mean to say that we never want you to apply ever again. And I think we need to be careful in terms of the wording we use as well. Like it's no. Well, it's not really no. It's just we have a criteria, and there's context and nuances around it. So it's about making people feel like, okay, they've at least considered me. I've not been progressed at this stage, but at least I can apply again, and that's a positive. You know what I'm saying?
I love the text thing. Yeah, I mean, I even applied for a new passport the other day, and I applied online, and they texted me saying, thank you so much, we've received your old passport. It felt a little bit more, I don't know, say more human, because I know it was automated, but you're right. I think there's so many channels, even WhatsApp, WhatsApp's being utilized as well for that. And that feels quite personal too. So yeah, I think it's thought around that is interesting. Sometimes if there's so many applicants, then you can appreciate that a human can't always get back to someone at that early stage for that kind of that bulk type recruitment.
Definitely. I think to your question though, when should companies provide candidates with feedback? My answer is directly always, always, and everybody. It's as simple as that. But you're going to kind of unpack that a little bit more. So we talked about kind of volume recruitment. I think at the other end where, like yourself, you're looking at kind of exec search and exec hiring. Surely the kind of feedback is so much. I mean, you really do need to be very considered in your feedback when you're kind of progressing senior level folks, because they're, you're probably having very open conversations with them, probably under NDA around the business, the role, etc. And then to respond to them and go, oh, okay, yes, no, it's not going to cut it at all, is it?
I mean, at the senior level, and then at any level.
Agreed.
But for me, because I'm doing more senior level searches, it's you've got to be really mindful that these people are dedicating time. It's like an hour or two thinking time
Yeah.
Then you've got to prepare for the interview. Then you've got to do the interview. Then you've got to like download it in your brain. How did it go? So you're investing a lot of thinking time and time into it.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm always appreciating, because I'm in the middle here between the company and the candidate. And you've got to appreciate that everyone's investing time. What I always find a bit funny is that candidate that wanted feedback, and when they start and you're suddenly hiring for them because they've enjoyed the experience and stuff, and I've been giving great feedback to them, they forget. People forget. We're human. It's very easy to slip into, like who wants to give the call at 5 p.m. on a Friday to tell someone that it's a no. As a human, you kind of, it's easy for people. Oh, I'll do it on Monday. Monday comes around and suddenly it slips. So we all have to work hard to not slip and to really.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
You and I have said this time and again on multiple shows, live or podcast. Feedback is the payment for somebody's time. It's what they deserve. It's the professional courtesy that you give to another human being. And whether, as you said, whether that's 5 o'clock on a Friday, 9 o'clock on a Monday, they deserve that feedback, right? And it's, and to be fair, that's possibly the worst part of our job, right? Is giving great people bad news. It's never nice, but you should never shy away from it.
No. And also to be honest, like my perspective on it is it's actually a gift. It's a gift to give someone feedback because you help them on their journey and it will help them improve. And the next one, because things work out and not everything's meant to be. There is a place for everyone in this world. And I just see, if someone hasn't got through, and I've received good feedback from companies, and you don't always, I see it as a good thing to give them feedback. And that's how I view it. And it's important to do. And people remember it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, it's, I think there is still that kind of challenge within the wider kind of TA and recruitment industry, in so much as the sliding scale of quality of interaction. And, you don't have to do a lot to kind of really raise that bar. But if everybody's doing that, that brings everybody up, and it sets a bar for us as an industry, which I think we should be mindful of and definitely responsible for,
Oh yeah. But there's also, there's so many people in this chain. So, you have the hiring manager, then the hiring manager is giving feedback to TA, who gives feedback to an agency, who then gives feedback to the candidate. And it just takes one person in that chain to sit on the feedback. Hiring manager's got busy, hasn't prioritized it. You're chasing, I'm chasing you, candidate's chasing me.
Yeah.
So
it's an interesting one. I agree. I think when it comes to certainly hiring manager feedback, and I appreciate sometimes that the dynamic is slightly different when it comes to kind of agency versus in-house. But actually, rather than sitting there and waiting for the hiring manager to provide feedback, recruiters have got to get better at asking better questions to elicit better quality feedback. So, if you know the hiring manager, the job really well, the candidate really well, then you should be able to ask some really great informed questions to elicit that feedback. And it shouldn't always be incumbent on the hiring manager to just kind of deliver X amount of bullet points. And that's that kind of step further in terms of quality, in terms of how you support, a person, a business to hire the individuals that they need for their business, basically.
I completely agree. It's such an easy win, and it has such a big impact on the experience of people.
Yeah, for sure.
It's huge because we know people speak about bad experiences more than good ones.
Sadly, yes.
It's how it works, right? How did you get to that firm? Oh, didn't hear it. Didn't hear anything.
Yeah.
Didn't even get an automated email telling me I was a no. Invested time going for an interview. In fact, I had 2 interviews. Didn't hear anything. It's such an easy thing to get right.
Yeah. And I tell you what, just a small anecdote on the kind of automated email. I was hiring for a role. It was a volume recruitment. So there was a lot of applications. I'm talking, hundreds. And I was looking at applications over the course of the weekend, and I was, progressing some and rejecting others. And I rejected, so this was on a Sunday, I rejected an individual And they came back and they were like, this is an automated email. Nobody's looking at job applications over the course of the weekend, et cetera, et cetera. You know, who do I complain to? And it got escalated to me, and I just responded back to it. I said, hey, look, happy to set up a chat. Just for context, I was actually looking at applications over the course of the weekend. I reviewed yours, and these were the reasons why I didn't progress you. And that individual came back, really grateful of the acknowledgement, the context. And actually, that didn't take me much more than, that kind of whole process was like 20 minutes investment of my time. So I think we need to be sensitive to the fact that, how we're kind of handling and managing feedback and being open to being challenged on our decisions as well. Not across the board and every time, but if somebody feels really strongly about it, they've got to feel like they have a kind of route to you to be able to ask further questions.
Definitely. And, I also appreciate that, some people are busy doing stuff, and it's sometimes things slip. I mean, for me, things slip. And if it has slipped, I'm like, really sorry, Mr. Candidate. I'm sorry I haven't got back to you sooner. And then, so we are human, and
yes, agreed. Yeah.
We're not always going to be perfect, but if we're striving to be a little bit better than yesterday, then
just own up to it. I mean, I've done the same myself. A few days longer than I'd promised in terms of feedback, and it's just being honest, saying, look, that's on me. I had the feedback, I just haven't got around to kind of scheduling, but this is it, and offer them the option to have a conversation.
Yeah, love that. I want to move on to this one, if I may.
Of course.
Why are people reluctant to hire people who have had bigger jobs? So, classic.
Oh man, there's a question.
It's a big question. I posted this on LinkedIn as well a few days ago, and I've had there's been a lot of interaction. And so
what
for
kind of
me,
responses did you get?
Most of it was bravo, completely agree. For me, it was, and I'll tell you what I think. I think the things I hear a lot are, and this is the feedback candidates get, you're too senior for the role. They'll just leave when something better comes up. They'll get bored. And they're like, correct me if I'm wrong, but broadly, probably the three things that you hear a lot. And I think in reality, if we're honest, people are scared to hire people who have more experience than them. A lot of people are unsure, maybe how to manage people that are older. And I mean, for me, you're missing such an opportunity here. For me, people that have got experience, because remember, not everyone wants to keep climbing the ladder. It's cool. It's cool to do an individual contributor role, or whatever you call it. People have so much experience that you can use. And for me, people miss a big trick. And obviously, there's this ageism thing that covers it. What do you think about it?
Man, it's such a big question, and I think so. Firstly, I think it's slightly company dependent, right? So a large scale enterprise business has a very specific hierarchy structure, and they have kind of, I guess, calibration for the levels of responsibility, etc. So perhaps I could understand that they wouldn't want to hire a former EVP for a director level role, because ultimately the calibration then within that particular structure might skew slightly.
Even if they're happy to do it.
So I'm coming to that piece. Yeah. So when you look at startups and scale ups, I think you can understand the rationale of somebody that may be a kind of an EVP going into a director of a startup, because ultimately it's going to be a very different experience for them, perhaps, and I think that perhaps the role and the scope could grow quite quickly. Because you tend to get involved in a lot more. So that I think company dependent, you could understand why that kind of excuse is used, but sometimes equally on the other side, I think you have to be quite open-minded to the kind of skills experience that they can deliver within the role. Whether they're happy to do it or not, I think is, it's difficult, isn't it? Because if you sort of, they're going to say, yes, I'm happy to be in that particular role. I'm happy to fulfill that particular position. That's a positive. But businesses do need to think about the kind of medium to long term, right? They're happy to go into that role now, but what if that particular role doesn't grow, has no growth potential? You've got to ask the question, where is, what's their motivators? What's going to keep them motivated? What's their ambitions around growth? Because human beings want to grow. They want, it's a natural inclination, isn't it? So I think it's fair to try and challenge them on why you're happy to go into that role. Yeah. I think you need to kind of bring that conversation into the context of the interview and not be afraid to ask it, and don't assume. Don't make those assumptions that they're going to leave. Don't make those assumptions that they're going to get, they're going to move on to the next big thing. Ask that. See how the person responds. Get a sense directly from them. Just don't make the assumption. I don't think did that kind of answer your question? I think it picked up parts of it, but not solely.
I mean, there isn't, I think just following on from your point there about don't assume. So not everyone wants to progress necessarily in work. Some people might progress. They want to progress down the gym, lifting weight. They're happy to turn up 9 to 5 and deliver a great job and take a paycheck and do a great job while they're there and switch out and go. I mean, that's fine, right? So I think, don't assume and ask them the question. The other thing is the average tenure in a job now is only 2.5 to 3 years. So, if the excuse is, well, maybe they won't progress long term in the company, you're gonna have to work really, really hard to keep people long term nowadays. I don't even think you can think of it anymore. It's such a dynamic world right now. So I think if you get someone in your mind, they're going to do 2.5, 3 years. Great. That's a good return from the hire, I think.
Yeah, I think it's interesting though, isn't it, that this illusion around permanent employment is still there. That when you hire a kind of permanent employee, there's this assumption that they're there inevitably. Yeah, exactly. Not many businesses approach it thinking, okay, this percentage of our workforce are probably likely to be here for 2 years. This percentage are 3 to 5 years. So they don't approach it in terms of kind of forecasting in that way. They may look at high performers and perhaps look at whether they're flight risks or not. But I don't think any business is really looking at it from that perspective in terms of almost like the average tenure is 2.5 years. So it'd be interesting to kind of introduce that into the conversation and see how that lands. I think I think it's that acknowledgement. Do you really want to sort of think? Do you want to be thinking the clock is ticking from day one? Somebody's just joined your business and you're thinking, wow, we've got 2.5 years of this person. That's it.
I think you've got to get into that mindset now. I think you've got to do, just as we're getting into the mindset of people working anywhere or remotely, hiring someone based in Sweden for a job that would have been in London. It's hard to get your head around it. It's hard to manage. It's hard to manage a team like that if you've never done it before. And I think this is the same. It's hard to get your head around it. It's hard to manage someone who's, or maybe it isn't, I mean, I know you hire someone who's 60, for example, and they want to work until they die. They don't want to retire, and there's no retirement age in the UK, and they're going to be amazing at this job you're hiring for. Why not hire them? So, but I think but people struggle with it, and that's the issue.
Well, that comes back to unconscious bias, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, it's kind of that, that kind of unconscious bias again informing an assumption that then informs a decision, which is possibly the worst kind of domino effect, right? Your unconscious bias informs an assumption that actually ends up being a decision.
Yeah,
I can. Yeah.
At the culture, they wouldn't fit our young culture, but diversity enriches and in all forms.
100%.
And if you have, it's like in a football team, you have some just quality Premier League footballers that have been there, they're like 30s, and they're influencing the dressing room, bring on the young ones. So I think, you've got to be open to it. That's my view on it. We talked a little bit about ghosting. So I had loads of questions on ghosting, and I mean, we can cover it. Yeah. I think the answer is the answer is yes. And we talked a bit. It's linked to feedback. And and it goes on, and it's it goes on for companies. You just don't hear. You interview somewhere, and I have loads of stories, so do you, about just people not hearing back, and that's feedback. Interestingly, not often talked about. It does work the other way around too. Candidates also ghost companies. People ghost people. I don't know why it happens. Dating, hiring, wherever it might be. I think we need to stop that.
The avoidance of having an uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah.
That's essentially what it is, right? It's kind of avoiding having to tell somebody, no, sorry, you haven't progressed. Avoiding a company to say, oh, hey, you've offered me a job, but actually I don't want to take it, but I don't want to tell you I don't want to take it. It's just it's just the avoidance of uncomfortable conversations. That's all it is.
Yeah. So you're right. You're right. No, I was going to say you're completely right. But again, have those tough conversations actually always end up well. It's great. I had a candidate call me up and he was, part of the shortlist for a search we're doing. And he called us like, really sorry, and I've just been offered a job. I'm going to have to withdraw. And I was like, that's great. Great that you found something. He'd been looking for a while. He was out of work. And that's great. I mean, there's always someone else that you can find that can take it. So if you're a candidate, don't ghost the employer. The recruiters, don't ghost the companies that you're applying and interviewing for, because it works both ways. So you never quite know when you're going to come up against someone. And obviously, clients, companies, hiring managers, don't ghost candidates.
Yeah, definitely. And if somebody's got another job, always wish them well, right? Man, that's a great thing. It's a positive outcome. Yeah. It may not directly benefit your situation, but that's still a positive thing. And in this kind of economic climate, more power to it, right? People finding job opportunities, all good. Right.
We've got a few more questions. We've got loads of questions to go, but I know we've gone on for 50. So I'm gonna pick a few more questions, which are probably my favorite ones. So this is one from Adam Gordon. This is Adam Gordon's phrase from Candidate ID. Shout out. And I did a little live with him on this. But I think it's really interesting. And for those that don't know, in-demand talent is more jobs than candidates. For example, a software engineer, for example, is in high demand. And then the counter to that is in-demand jobs. So many people, few jobs. So thinking about how to hire in-demand talent, I think is a really, really interesting one, especially in this environment where people get it into their minds that, hey, it's a pandemic, of course someone wants to come work for us. So what do you think are some good practices around attracting hard to find talent?
So I think Adam's right. You do need to think about whether you are hiring in-demand talent. First and foremost, you need to acknowledge what particular profiles that might be. You can't just kind of assume that every role that you're recruiting for has the same level of kind of competition. And I think for me, it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is 1, creating experience, 2, creating transparency, 3, I think there's a personalization element in there as well, which technology can help you with, in terms of be able to sort of create or be the kind of foundation for that particular experience. And then I think you really do need to think about how many of these individuals that are classed as in-demand talent you're going to hire. If you're just going to think about it in terms of 1 or 2 hires per quarter, that's really short-sighted thinking. And I know that Adam's a big advocate for kind of nurturing talent through obviously the kind of platform that he delivers. And he's right. I think you do need to sort of be thinking about a 12-month plan of the number of hires you need to make and how you're going to approach them at different points during the course of that particular year, what experience they're going to have. And obviously you need to consider the fluctuations of the actual employment market, right? In terms of, just simple things like January, February, we're coming into kind of bonus territory. Is anybody going to move then? Is it going to be easier to actually attract more of the in-demand talent from, I don't know, March through to June or July? This year has thrown everybody a curveball with a global pandemic. So I think you do need to be thinking you need to be very purposeful about how you hire in demand, or how you approach hiring in demand talent, because there's no guarantee that just because you put all of this in place, you're going to hire the number of individuals that you want. And that's the beauty of it, is in so much as you need that flexibility within the plan to kind of iterate as you go and use the learnings as you go to improve the experience, improve the personalization, and improve the engagement.
Yeah, definitely. I think all of this links to everything we've spoken about. And to quote my colleague Kelly in the US, it's the white glove service. It's just a great experience, great branding. You know, all of these little things, if you do them well, it gives you a much better chance of getting people that you want.
And I think you need to be mindful of the data that you can utilize, right? To understand this particular market. It's not sufficient enough to create an experience that you think is great and not validate that in any way, shape, or form. And the best way to validate that is data, or certainly trialing certain approaches with, and always trying to get working groups together to inform your approach, right? And actually, just rather than just trying to hire a particular individual, perhaps ask their opinion about how they would like to be approached, and try and be informed both in terms of the types of people that you're targeting, but equally utilizing data to inform your approach.
And also you can engage with these people all the time, right? You can find out where they hang out. Are they online somewhere? Contribute to the conversations. Go along to where they're going to be. You can get into that world rather than just dipping in when you need to take one out.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's always in any community, the best way to really realize the benefits from that community is by contributing yourself, right? Actually giving something to that community. So I think, you're absolutely right. You could go and kind of socialize and hang out, and then try and hire somebody, and then not return to that community until you need to make another hire. And I think that's the worst possible approach.
Yeah, definitely. Right. This is a big one. It's a big one because I think it's super interesting, and a lot of people have muted it, and we're talking about working from home. So will work from home affect my promotion prospects? And just in context, specifically against someone who turns up to the office and sits next to their boss, because I think the kind of the conversation is, so this person's coming in, sitting next to the boss, they get on really well, they're in person. I'm somewhere else virtually. I'm doing a better job. Let's say I'm delivering better, but it's pretty tough. And then maybe this unconsciously or consciously, it's tough to give the work from home person the promotion over the in person. That's the conversation. What do you think?
I think it's an interesting one, because you're kind of moving into a bit of a grey area there. So theoretically and realistically, every individual should be, kind of evaluated based on their outcomes, right? What they deliver, what they generate, what they contribute to the business. Perhaps some of the grey area is the fact that, kind of personal relationships, consciously or unconsciously, do influence people's decisions, right? And certainly perhaps if there's a scenario where two individuals have contributed equal amounts of value, where do you differentiate between the two in terms of the person that you move forward for that particular promotion? And I think it's a challenging one. It is a challenging one, and it does come into that kind of unconscious bias training, and really trying to strip away that, just because Glenn and Lewis are kind of in the office and they share a coffee, and kind of Suzanne or somebody else works remotely, but kind of Glenn and Suzanne contribute the same amount and deliver real value. Lewis should not be influenced by the fact that you can sit down and have a coffee with Glenn. No. And that's something that Lewis has to essentially reconcile and be aware of, and actually not just be thinking in the immediacy of, oh God, they're in the office, but actually longer term as well. So when it comes to a promotion, it's like you're promoting that person into the role, and you should be theoretically thinking about what is their next step and how can they continue to contribute in that role? How can they continue to grow?
Yes.
So it's
absolutely.
removing those kind of perhaps day-to-day anchors and reframing it in terms of the context of they've delivered this and what can they look to deliver going forward.
Interesting. So really a bit of structure and process around it, and maybe it needs to be a little bit more formal if it isn't already, if people are working virtually, just to make sure that it's fair, it's open, and also thinking about what are people being measured against? Why is someone being promoted over someone else?
Yeah,
I think it's important.
And I would always advocate for in promotion panels, there is absolutely nothing wrong, in my opinion, of getting somebody outside of that team to sit in on the promotion panel as a kind of proxy in terms of just evaluating it from almost like an outside looking in perspective. You know what I mean?
Yes.
They understand the business, they understand the context, but actually they may not genuinely have, you would like to think that they probably wouldn't have a particular bias towards any one person. And you can bring them in to inform that kind of promotion panel, right?
Yeah. I'd like to think. I'm saying yes. I think in reality, there's some work to do, because I can see.
Oh, agreed.
See there being. I can see that this bias just coming through, and
well, this question is highly unlikely to be asked at the moment. In businesses, I don't think anybody. Well, not that I'm aware of. I don't think anybody's really thinking seriously about, do you think there's any bias here in terms of, working from home?
I think it should be there.
There is. And I agree there should be. I just wonder whether it is actually being discussed amongst everything else that's kind of going on. Is this something that's kind of acknowledged at the moment?
Right. You're right. Last question before we sign off.
Cool, man.
And I think this is topical for a lot. Should I just take any role right now? And then I guess, thinking about it, there's a lot of industries that have not done well over the pandemic. Economics, right? You need a job.
Yeah,
or you might have lost your job and you need to find one. So I don't know about you. For me, it's better to be working than not. And I think if you find a role, and even if say it's a contract and you're a perm person, and there's a conversation around that, people are sometimes nervous to do that. Even if it's a lateral move, even if and someone gives you the chance, even if you're too big for the role and there's a role that comes up, you're happy to do. I personally, I would say go for
it. I guess my answer to the question is it really does depend on your personal circumstances. I think if you can see a way to kind of keep searching for the role that you really, really want, then fantastic. But like you said, economics sometimes dictate, and you need to take a job. So it really does come down to the individual. The only thing I would caution on is searching for a job takes a lot of time and energy.
Yes.
And if you think you're going to be searching for another job in 3 months' time, or you're taking a job and still searching for a job, that's a lot to kind of take on at any one time. So you just have to kind of think about the balance of that. I would probably say, to counter that, is this a role that you could see yourself being in for at least 12 months? If the answer is God no, I could probably just about last a month, then please don't take the job, because actually it's probably going to be more hard work for you than anything.
You're right. But then for your mind, you're right. For your mindset, for your mental health, it's you want to feel like you're contributing. You want to feel like you're adding value somewhere. You want to be doing something, and even if it's some charity work, something that's just completely different, while you find the role that you want, I would do that. And for a senior role right now, even before the pandemic, it could take at least 9 months to find something. You go through, you find some opportunities, you go through the interview process, etc. So for me, I would be open to things that aren't perfect, and our careers aren't always a straight line. You've got to,
as we know, man.
Meanders. So
yeah,
I would be comfortable with it. I would recommend getting comfortable with that and seeing where it goes.
So. I think you're right. It's speak to your friends, speak to your family, speak to people you trust. If you're slightly indecisive around it, kind of take guidance from them. It's you can garnering those different perspectives can sometimes really help you answer that question.
Yeah, definitely get a good support network around you. Ask for advice. I love that.
100%.
Glenn, thank you so much. What a great place to end.
Thank you, Lewis.
Thank you for coming on the show again. And
my pleasure, man. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, brother.